Okay, we're going to begin. Can everybody hear okay in the audience? Yep, okay. Thumbs up. Thank you very, very much. Hi and welcome everybody. It's so nice to see so many amazing staff in the audience today. To begin our meeting, and on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded, unsurrendered Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Before we proceed, I'll ask the committee coordinator to do a quick roll call of all members, with Councillor Johnson and Lowe having sent regrets.
Councillor Luloff.
Present.
Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Tierney. Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Lowe. Vice Chair Carr.
Present.
Chair Menard.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that. My voice is a little under the weather today. It's not because of St. Patrick's Day yesterday. I went to bed very early last night, but I think I'll make it through hopefully today. If not, I'll ask Vice Chair Carr to come help me with the awards. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. Seeing none. Are the minutes confirmed from Tuesday, February 18th, 2025? Thank you very much. So with that, we'll proceed right to the Environmental Excellence Awards presentation. And I'll go right up to the podium. So on to our 2024 Environmental Excellence Awards. Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue. First, I'd like to welcome our city manager, Wendy Stephenson, senior leadership, and the award nominators to our committee meeting this morning. I'd also like to extend a very special welcome to the nominees for the 2024 Environmental Excellence Awards. Thank you all for being here. These awards celebrate exceptional staff members who undertake the vitally important work of advancing the city's climate mitigation, adaptation, and sustainability efforts. Taken together, their projects represent truly impressive feats of collaboration, innovation, and expertise. As chair of the Environment and Climate Change Committee, I'm proud to honor you today and to celebrate your incredible work over the past year. I'd like to ask all nominees in the room today to stand or wave, and I invite everyone to please join me in a round of applause. I think we're going to do a big group picture at the end as well with all members. So stay tuned for that. I'd like to ask and begin by asking Wendy Stephenson to say a few words. Wendy, come on up.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I have to admit, my voice is also crackly. I was not out late last night. So forgive me if I do have a few crackles this morning. But thank you again, Chair Menard, and thank you to the members of the Environment and Climate Change Committee for hosting the Environmental Awards this morning. It's an absolute exciting time to be here and recognize and celebrate all of the amazing work for all the staff that are here. And I have to say, I was absolutely astounded when I walked in this morning and I saw all of you, the sheer number of you. So congratulations. It's absolutely amazing. Bonjour à tous, que plaisir d'être ici avec vous ce matin. And I want to join Chair Menard and welcome all of the nominees. You have all demonstrated leadership, innovation, and dedication to making our city greener, cleaner, and healthier. And I'd also like to welcome the nominators for recognizing the exemplary work of our colleagues and the value of the nominated projects. I know I had the opportunity to look at all of the projects as we went through this process, and I was absolutely astounded and just amazed in terms of the work that was done and how you're advancing the goals of the city. And lastly, but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome and thank the leaders who are here today to support and recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of your team members. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your support and your dedication to this work across the city. You know, it's a true resemblance of one city and one team in terms of the work that you do. And it is going to have a lasting and positive impact on the city and our community. You know, I'm always amazed by the creativity, the expertise, and the passion that you all show continuously to improve the changing landscape here at the city. And there's 13 projects this morning that we're going to talk about and recognize in the awards. Les 13 projets sont parmi les finalistes de les prix d'excellence en matière d'environnement de cette année ne font pas d'exception. And once again, our nominees, and I say all of you, have stepped up and you've worked collaboratively to protect our environment, engage with our stakeholders, to encourage responsible practices within our community. And each of the projects nominated today, you know, touches on the city's strategic objectives designed to ensure that we are building a greener and resilient city. And these projects, they reduce our emissions associated with our city's operations and our facilities. They increase diversion of organic waste from our landfills. They preserve our urban tree canopy. They increase the city's resilience in extreme weather and changing climate conditions. And they improve key infrastructure in our asset management. And as a municipality, it's really important that we lead by an example, demonstrating both practical and positive approaches to fight against climate change. En tant que municipalité, nous devons donner l'accent en appliquant des approches concrètes et positives visant à lutter contre les changements climatiques. And the work of our nominees proves that we are continuing to make great strides using environmentally sustainable practices to deliver our essential services every day to our residents. And I say thank you to all of you in the room. Your leadership, your innovation have helped us move forward on our environmental and protective sustainability goals. And, you know, it's more than that. You think about the projects and the initiatives that we're recognizing today. I know this work is going to benefit our residents and our communities for years to come. And you should all be very proud of these accomplishments. Seeing and hearing about the successes is one of the best things of my job. And I have to say that I'm so pleased to be able to congratulate all of you in person here this morning. Vous pouvez être fiers de ce que vous avez accompli. Merci pour votre sens d'innovation en matière de pratique municipale verte. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Chairman Ard, and say thank you very much to everybody. Congratulations, félicitations, et merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Each year, we see the undeniable effects of climate change here in Canada and around the world. More frequent flooding, more frequent and severe fires and storms, more extreme weather and heat events. These represent serious threats to the health and well-being of Canadians everywhere. Right here in Ottawa, we're experiencing warmer, wetter, and more unpredictable weather. As a city, it's important that we recognize the very real effects that this has on the lives of residents and ensure that our work focuses on the important role that our city can play in mitigating climate change and building climate resiliency. C'est pour cette raison que l'une de nos 4 priorités stratégiques est de bâtir une ville verte et résiliente. Now, all of today's nominated projects address climate change, though they each take a different approach in doing so. Some of the projects we'll hear about today examine the financial implications of climate change, others apply to procurement lens, still others look to technical innovation. Each of them discovered benefits for the community along the way. So today, our nominees, on behalf of the City of Ottawa and all our residents, thank you for your incredible work. Au nom de la ville et de tous et toutes, nos résidents, je vous remercie. This year, I had the privilege of being a member of the selection panel for the Environmental Excellence Awards and reviewing each nomination in great detail. The 2 categories for the awards are internal initiatives, which advance our climate goals within the City of Ottawa, and the community initiatives, which touch the lives of residents and advance sustainability in Ottawa more broadly. The nominees for the internal category are The Corporate Facility Electric Boiler Program, which introduced automated electric boilers and systems to city facilities, resulting in a 22% reduction in emissions and reduced utility costs for participating facilities. The electrification of public works small equipment, a pilot program that successfully replaced small gas-powered equipment with electric-powered equipment, reducing emissions and introducing health benefits for employees. The Excess Soil Management Program, a program to reuse excess soil where possible and minimize the volume of soil sent to landfill. From Rakes to Riches Topsoil Pilot Project, which turned 20,000 tons of leaf and yard waste into nutrient-rich topsoil. The integration of climate considerations into asset management plans, an initiative that examined how climate change affects city assets and associated costs and maintenance implications. The Municipal Budget Climate Lens, which uses a qualitative scale to rate each new capital budget request based on GHG emission reductions and climate resiliency. The OC Transpo Building Automation Rollout, a program that introduced a competitive, sustainable procurement process to the purchase of OC Transpo building automation systems. The Pedestrian Facilities Program, which strives to increase access to more sustainable modes of transportation, particularly in underserved communities, and Smart Cover Technology, an innovative remote sewer system monitoring program that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and extends the life of city infrastructure. These 9 nominations represent the highest levels of expertise, professionalism, and teamwork. I would like to ask all nominees in the internal category to please stand or wave, and I invite everyone to join me in a round of applause for their outstanding contributions. And I am pleased to announce that the winner of the 2024 Environmental Excellence Award in the internal category is From Rakes to Riches, the Topsoil Pilot Project. Congratulations. With a topsoil recipe and specialized equipment, this team was able to turn 20,000 tons of leaf and yard waste into topsoil on site, reducing hauling distances, greenhouse gas emissions, and wear and tear on city roads. In addition, this important initiative saved the city an estimated $1.2 million in 2024. And again, this is a pilot project with much more to come. So congratulations to Megan Farnell, Dan Dolliver, Justin O'Keefe, Scott McIntyre, Frederick Doran, Dan Phillips, Steve Schulz, Lynn Hammond, Brody Erfel, Brandon Maynard, Jenny Yule, Colin McKee, Paul D'Entremont. Thank you. And congratulations to the Rakes to Riches team. Thank you for your incredible work. Please do come up to receive your certificate, pins, and join me for a photo. Oh, I know. Okay. On 3, 1, 2, 3. Amazing. Thank you so much. I guess so. Okay. And now for the nominations in the community category. These 4 nominated teams worked within the community at large to directly benefit Ottawa residents. They are Cleaning the Capital, nominated for an excellent promotional campaign that resulted in a 7% increase in participation and an 8% increase in registered cleanup projects. It's been an amazing project throughout the city for many years. La Roche Park Revitalization, nominated for the successful completion of a park renewal project that reduced the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the standard excavation. Public bike parking strategy, bike lockers, nominated for the successful introduction of secure bike lockers at 3 locations in Ottawa's downtown core to help enable active transportation options for residents. And the Ottawa Repair Cafe is nominated for sponsoring and hosting repair cafe events where volunteers from the Ottawa Tool Library helped residents repair or repurpose household items. Before we announce this year's winner, I'd like to invite all the nominees in the community category to please stand or wave, and please join me in a round of applause for these nominees' outstanding contributions. It's my pleasure to announce the 2024 Environmental Excellence Award winner in the community category. The award goes to the amazing team responsible for the Repair Cafe events. This community-based project gives new life to household items while teaching repair skills to the community. By prolonging the life of household items, this program helps to extend the life of the landfill, reduce CO2 emissions, and help residents save money, something we love around here. So congratulations to Delta Rubin, Kendra Hoskin, Mario Barron, Laura Young, and Rachel Jones. Congratulations to the Repair Cafe events team. You can come on down. One, two. Good. Thank you very much. Okay. Nous sommes très fiers du professionnalisme et du dévouement des gagnants d'aujourd'hui et toutes les candidats nominés pour cette prix prestige. Please join me again in a round of applause. Lots of applause today. On behalf of my council colleagues, the city manager, and the senior leadership team, just let me say how much we appreciate the work that all of you do. Climate mitigation and adaptation is more important than ever, and the good work that you do is central to our city's climate goals and to the safety and quality of life of our residents. Thank you very much for your efforts. So I think with that, we're actually asking everybody to come up for a group photo in a moment. But I will just mention the committee is going to carry on after that group photo with the remainder of our meeting. But before we do, we'll have everyone, you're able to, so excuse me, let me just say this again. There is a room, Colonel By room, that you're going to have, there's a small coffee reception there. You can collect your individual certificates and enjoy some refreshments. If you haven't been there before, there is signage outside to get upstairs to the second floor, and there'll be others leading you there. Thank you again for all of your incredible work. And at this point, again, I'll invite everybody up for a big group photo in the horseshoe, and all council members to come up as well that are in the room. So everybody up. Just rolls. Okay, so we're going to continue with the meeting. Just a reminder for anybody that is left in the room, any winners, nominees, nominators, senior leaders, that small coffee reception with some other refreshments is in the Colonel Ballroom. So head there for some fun. At this point, we're going to move to the Green Fleet strategy. There is a procedural motion necessary to add the presentation. And so I'll ask Vice Chair Carr to read that in.
Turn it on here.
Be it resolved that the Environment and Climate Change Committee approve that the rules of procedure be waived subject to subsection 83(4)(a) of the procedure bylaw, being bylaw number 2022-410, to receive a staff presentation on the Green Fleet strategy.
Is that carried? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll ask staff to jump into the presentation. This was also presented at Transportation Committee, but obviously a lot of overlap here with Environment Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee members. My name's Lila Gibbons, and I'm the Director of Fleet Services. I'm joined here today with Neil Grandy, who's the Manager of Fleet Maintenance and Technical Services. Neil spent the last year or so working very closely with our consultant and our partners across the city to develop the Green Fleet strategy that we're going to present to you today. We're also joined here today by our close partners from the Climate Change and Resiliency team. So to my far right, we've got Nicole Hoover, who's their director. We also have Alyssa Lansfield, who's a program manager for the Climate Change Mitigation team. So Chair, in conversations with you at our briefing, we certainly understand how important this strategy is to the Environment and Climate Change Committee's mandate. So we're very excited to be here today to present to you the Green Fleet strategy that will be going to Council on March 26 for final approval. La stratégie de la flotte verte est une stratégie compréhensive qui est réaliste et réalisable. Ce plan adopte une approche agile pour la transition de notre flotte municipale vers des technologies à faible émission de carbone et est à zéro émission au cours des 2 prochaines décennies. Il nous permettra de rester attentifs à l'évolution des technologies et conditions de marché. So as I just mentioned, this is a comprehensive strategy that is both realistic and achievable. This plan takes an agile approach in transitioning our municipal fleet to low carbon and zero emission technologies over the next 2 decades to ensure that we continue to be responsive to the changing market technologies and the conditions. So merci and thank you. Now I'll turn the mic over to Alyssa, who will start the presentation for us.
Great, thank you. Oh, it's on, perfect. So my name's Alyssa. Thank you so much for having us. Really happy to be here with our fleet partners. So I'm from the city's Climate Change and Resiliency Services. I'll speak really briefly to how the Green Fleet strategy is aligned with our corporate objectives and strategic priorities. Then I'll pass it off to Neil to get into the details of the strategy. So first, I'd like to say this strategy, as you'll see, is well aligned with our CCMP, a Climate Change Master Plan targets. It's also well aligned with the Energy Evolution strategy that speaks to our mitigation targets here at the city. It's one of the priority projects under Energy Evolution. And then it's also well aligned with our council strategic priorities. So specifically, priority 16, a city that is green and resilient. And so we're really pleased to see that alignment across the board. Next slide, please. So as a refresher, here are our targets under the Climate Change Master Plan for GHG reductions. We're looking towards a 100% target in 2040, and this Green Fleet strategy, as you'll see, is well aligned with that. The strategy is taking us to a 93% reduction when it comes to our green fleet. And I'd like to echo what Lila said just now, that we believe this is a realistic, it's an agile, it's a financially sustainable strategy as well. And it brings us that significant progress towards our targets. And so we're really pleased to be standing with the fleet team today. So I'll pass this off to Neil.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please.
Before we start talking green strategy, let's take a look at what actually municipal city-owned fleet is actually made up of. And today it's made up of 2,815 units. And as you can see, those are ambulances, fire trucks, heavy vehicles, light vehicles, and equipment. And by equipment, I mean things like off-road equipment, loaders and graders, as well as things like sidewalk equipment. So 2,815 today. And of course, out of that, we have 251 of those are actually green right now. So 69 of them are electric units and 182 of those are hybrid. And based on past green fleet plans that have been put together, we've taken the key pieces of always selecting green as our first choice, really, and have operationalized that, of course, in our replacement policy and replacement procedures. So fleet will always look for a green option, really whenever possible, especially when life cycling a unit. Go to the next slide. So let's take a look at what actually goes into the green fleet strategy. The first thing we wanted to do was outline and identify really our objectives. And as both Lila and Alyssa have mentioned, an agile strategy was a very important component to this approach for us. And by agile, I mean, it is something that we are going to continually look at and have built-in phases throughout through to 2040. Where we are regularly looking at technology in the market, and then of course are updating our overall strategy to make sure that we are incorporating the most relevant technology that meets our operational needs. And you're going to hear me talk about things like our operational needs, and based on what we know today, there's going to be two phrases that you're going to hear me say quite a bit throughout this presentation. After that, of course, we wanted to assess, well, what technologies are on the market today that make relevant sense to us. So what low carbon tech would we want to utilize within the strategy? Of course, then once we identify what technologies we want to use, well, then we want to take a look at what will fleet look like out through to 2040 and how will we mature the fleet as we get out incorporating that technology. And we'll run through that here shortly with you. After that, now that we know what technology makes sense, we're going to have to look at, well, what energy are we going to have to supply to it? And of course, after, we'll take a look at what kind of capital costs are we looking at and what kind of operating costs, and then ultimately package that up really into, well, what is our GHG production potential based on the technologies that we feel are the most relevant to incorporate into our plan. So to do that, we utilized a number of different inputs, of course, past green fleet plans, as I've mentioned, as Alyssa mentioned, the GHG inventory that was done from 2020. We took a look at our own asset inventory and the life cycle management of our own asset that we have in place today, as well as operational requirements from our operational partners that we work with, as well as our capital and operating costs that we currently have, and of course, a number of stakeholder consultations that were done throughout the process. And really at the end, we turn that into our result, which is our action plan to really help the city reach that low carbon future and really working towards zero emissions by 2040. We can go to the next slide, please. So the green strategy itself is made up of 5 different sections that we're going to run through. Of course, the first section is basically our current condition assessment. And when we look at current condition, it's basically going to be looking at replacing like for like, as well as we'll talk about what types of low carbon technologies were really in the market today that make sense for us. Next, we'll take a look at our overall agile approach, and then we'll take a look at how we ultimately transition the fleet, if you will, and what that future plan is going to look like. After that, we'll take a look at infrastructure and, of course, our energy supply plan. And then lastly, of course, we'll take a look at really what our cost benefit analysis are. Next slide, please. Wait for that one to switch for me. So what we did in order to start this, of course, is take a look at our current condition assessment. And as I said, current condition is taking a look at replacing like for like unit. And if we do that and continued on that path today, we would predict or model out about an 18% savings in GHG. And that's simply because of improvements in technology that appear on the market, as well as things like clean fuel legislation. So we do forecast an 18% savings in GHG if we continue to replace like for like. But of course, as Alyssa outlined, that is not the direction that we want to go. We want to be as close as we can to 100%. And for me, what was quite fascinating about this chart is if you look through that graph, there's a large maroon type section through that. And that is actually all heavy duty vehicles. That's all what are referred to as Class 8 vehicle. So they produce a significant amount of GHG in proportionate to how many for few vehicles we actually have for that. So it's why, as we move forward, we need to have such a significant focus really on heavy duty vehicles and ensuring that we have solutions in place to be able to solve the heavy duty GHG production. So 18% simply not good enough. So let's take a look at how do we get even better. So if you go to the next slide, please. So now we took a look at what technologies on the market actually make sense. And to do that, we assessed 9 different technologies. And those technologies, of course, are things like battery electric, hybrid electric. We looked at biodiesel, renewable diesel. We looked at compressed natural gas, renewable natural gas, and we looked at hydrogen fuel cell are the types of technologies that were incorporated. And after doing that overall assessment, really battery electric came out to be the most favorable technology right now, based on what we know today. And directly behind that, of course, we do have hybrid vehicles, but then we also have hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And fuel cells are quite interesting, especially when we start looking at really this strategy being a roadmap for the city as to where we want to take fleet and the fuel types that we really want to see. And fuel cells really emerged as a strong contender for heavy duty vehicles, especially at 2030 and beyond. And then really, we have a dual type of technology approach here, utilizing both battery electric and fuel cell electric vehicles from really 2033 onward is our overall strategy here. So our key takeaways when we studied the technologies in the market is we'll look at light vehicles today, really continuing to integrate battery electric vehicles, which of course fleet already does. As I mentioned, we will look for a hybrid or an electric option always whenever we're life cycling something. And as well, medium duty and heavy duty vehicles, really looking at both battery electric and fuel cell. Of course, battery electric in medium and heavy duty are really dependent on working with our operational partners to make sure that they meet the overall operational need. And of course, we'll be continuing through that agile approach, really looking at the market readiness through our agile approach. And then we're able to simply go through and do an overall update on this at set intervals throughout the duration of the strategy. We go to the next slide, please. So we talk agile and we look at where we are today. So as I mentioned, we took a look at our current condition assessment, which replaces like for like, which is not necessarily what fleet does today. So we are on what we call a reduced emissions path. And by reduced emissions, I mean we are already incorporating both battery electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles into fleet when we replace vehicles. So we are on reduced emissions, and I'll show you what that model looks like on the next couple slides. But beyond that, really, it's the pivotal technology review that we want to do within the next 3 to 5 years, of course, is really when fuel cell vehicles are predicted to really come on the market, especially for medium duty and heavy duty. And as I pointed out earlier, it's why there needs to be such a significant focus on heavy duty to bring down that GHG production. But after we do that pivotal review, then we pretty much look to switch over to what we call towards zero emission. And by towards zero emission, it means we are incorporating a dual technology type of approach, both battery electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles, in order to help the city achieve its overall goal under the climate change master plan. We go to the next slide, please. So as I talk about for GHG reduction, the bottom graph, as you see, is for reduced emissions. So when we modeled out what fleet currently does today, out through to 2040, we predict about a 38% reduction in GHG. So certainly better than the 18% that we talk about if we just continue to replace like for like. However, it is still not achieving the target that we want. We want to be as close to 100% as we can. And as you see the chart above that, where we incorporate in both battery electric and fuel cell vehicles, which are targeted on heavy duty and some medium, but really medium and heavy duty vehicles, we are able to achieve 93% modeled production or reduction of GHG for the city. And really that is by putting a heavy focus really on the medium duty and heavy duty vehicles, and why the hydrogen aspect will play such a large part in the overall city success to bring GHG further down. So we go to the next slide. So We've discussed what type of technology we're going to use, and you've seen the type of GHG reduction potential we have. Let's talk about what fleet itself is actually going to be made up of. And as I mentioned, we will use a dual technology type of approach, battery electric and fuel cell vehicles, in order to achieve our 93% reduction. So when we mature the fleet and look out through to 2040, fleet itself will be made up of approximately 75% battery electric. By 2040, there'll be 13% fuel cell vehicles, but there's 12% internal combustion engine or an ICE vehicle. And that's because, as I mentioned earlier, this is based on what we know today. And again, it's why an agile approach is so important, to have set intervals where we are really reviewing technology and are updating our overall models to incorporate the most relevant technology to meet our operational needs. So if we do this in our next 3 to 5 years, additional technology certainly can be on the market. And now we drop from 12% down to, say, 8%. And then when we run it in another 5 years, we're able to drop that down to about 2%. So the main piece here is we're not making any type of decision today that will hold out through until 2040. We will be continually assessing the technology that is in the market in order to be able to truly pivot to the strategy to make sure that we are doing the best things and the right things, obviously, that meet our operational needs, but really in the best interest of the city to do that. Next slide, please. So now that we know what fleet's going to look like, let's talk about the type of energy that we're going to need in order to power that. And of course, the first component of that is going to be battery electric. And we do forecast really 2033 being a pretty peak year, if you will, for charging infrastructure installation. But in order to help prepare for that, Fleet already is working with our partners in facilities by providing Fleet's needs and information into any of these site electrification studies that are being done around the city. And that's to make sure, of course, that any work being done to upgrade electrical infrastructure already has Fleet's needs incorporated into it to ensure that we will be successful in the overall future. Secondary to battery electric, of course, is hydrogen. And as we discussed, really with a focus on medium duty and heavy duty, and where hydrogen will be a part of the city's success to reduce its GHG. This overall strategy gives the city the visibility towards that roadmap and that success to be ready by 2030 or 2033 and beyond. And to do that, it's roughly forecasted to be about 4 years, if you will, to put in hydrogen infrastructure to support the city. And we predict right now, or forecast right now, starting installation of infrastructure by 2028 to be ready by 2031, which coincides pretty much, as I pointed out earlier, the 2030 through to 2033 type of availability of medium duty and heavy duty vehicles. So, but the other key piece that I want to talk about, as I presented this, of course, at the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee, and when we did a bit of a roadshow, there were some questions brought up really around sort of recognition of rural needs. One of the pieces, of course, I wanted to talk about is vehicles that we transition to, whether it is battery electric or hydrogen. Always we do that in consultation with our service area partners to make sure that vehicles will meet our overall operational needs. So out in a rural example, we certainly wouldn't look at an electric unit and simply convert a unit into an electric vehicle just for the sake of it. We want to ensure that the unit will actually meet the overall operational need. And that's where a technology like hydrogen really makes a lot of sense for rural applications, because a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle will operate similar to the exact way that you run a diesel unit today. So really things like the sheer distance, if you will, that certain rural units have to drive, where battery electric will not suit that, then we would look really to a fuel cell type option to do it. But we would never switch a vehicle solely to an electric vehicle just for the sake of it. We want to make sure it meets the overall need. So next slide, please. All right. So the plan that we've talked about today, really the roadmap that we talked today, of course, is, as Lada mentioned earlier, a realistic plan to really transition the city into a low carbon state and really work towards zero emission by 2040. The plan is also very responsive to the changes in technology out in the market and really permit periods of time for us to formally be able to review the technology and incorporate in the plan, and obviously update that plan to make sure that we have the best roadmap to help the city meet its overall needs. Now, that's not to say that Fleet won't continually look for available technology and to be able to incorporate. We will constantly be looking for the most relevant technology, always to be able to incorporate into our life cycling needs. But when we look at what our overall cost benefit shows, if you look at the baseline today, what we forecast for baseline spending out towards what we talk about for towards zero emission, we do not forecast spending any additional money beyond what our baseline already shows we would spend. And actually, when we look at this to achieve our 93% reduction, we actually show modeled savings of $6.5 million out through to 2040. Just to clarify, that's not annual savings, that is the total savings out, but it is still savings overall. And we do not forecast spending any further money than we would already need to manage the fleet if we just continued to replace like for like. And as you'll see up there, the availability for capital, of course, comes from maintenance savings, because as we look at electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, those vehicles themselves require less maintenance, as well as there is savings with respect to fuel. And one piece, of course, that I wanted to mention about our hydrogen, and when we talk fuel, what is proposed here is we would produce green hydrogen in order to fuel city vehicles as well. But ultimately, when we look at our cost benefit today, there's no additional forecasted money. Now, periodically or at points in time, there may be single need capital requests that may come forward, but those capital requests in the grand scheme ultimately balance out based on where savings are pulled from. So we don't spend any more than we currently forecasted to spend. So next slide. So in summary, we want to be working towards zero emission, of course, with an agile strategy that utilizes both battery electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles to save us approximately 93% or see a reduction in GHG by 93%, while saving us $6.5 million by 2040. Next slide. Lastly, we'll just go over a bit of the work that's currently being done related to hydrogen. So right now, we are currently working on infrastructure to be able to set up testing and piloting of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, or vehicles that will incorporate hydrogen into their operation. So that's currently underway right now. And then we've identified 3 other types of hydrogen tech that we actually want to incorporate for trials and pilots with our operational partners. The add-on systems will look at light vehicles. The dual fuel type units, of course, will look at more medium and heavy duty vehicle, really more on heavy duty. And then we have our full fuel cell vehicle as well, that we've already had some conversations, if you will, on availability of that unit. So definitely a broad approach here, and making sure that we are looking at both light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles for the incorporation of hydrogen. And that's what I got for you today. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for that presentation, and the good news with the plan that will benefit the city financially and with reduced emissions. It's great to see. I will see if some of my colleagues have questions. I know this was presented at another committee as well. No delegation on this one, I don't believe. No. So if this is just for information, but Councillor Curry, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. That was a very helpful presentation. I just have a couple of questions. So Hydro Ottawa is doing a similar thing, right? They're looking at their fleet, right? You know, the whole concept that, of course, we can't ask everybody else to be doing things like this, but not do it ourselves, right? So I just wonder how much you talk to the staff at Hydro Ottawa in charge of changing their fleet over. And then I have another question, it's Hydro Ottawa yet again, but just on the fleet conversion.
Thank you for that, Chair. We actually are meeting with Hydro Ottawa quite regularly, and we are looking at partnering with them on some potential pilots when we look at the heavy equipment. So they're in the same situation that we are in terms of their heavy equipment and requirement for 24/7 operations. So we do meet with them regularly, and we do have a meeting coming up very shortly with their fleet manager, just to look at both their garage space, what they're doing with some of their current fleet now.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that, because there may be some economies of scale. You never know, right? My other Hydro Ottawa question is about the power to charge these vehicles, right? So the energy needs, obviously you're talking to them. Have they talked about how battery energy storage may help in this situation, and not necessarily for the fuel cell ones, but the battery powered ones?
Thank you, Chair. We haven't talked specifically about that. What we're looking at right now is we've provided them with our 3-year plan on where we're looking at installing EV charging infrastructure. They're supporting us on whether they have the grid that can support that. But we are definitely talking to them regularly to look at all ideas on how do we have redundancy, how do we ensure that there is power available when there's issues with power shortages and things like that. So we will keep those conversations open.
Wonderful to hear. The last question I have is about embedded carbon. You know, we have this conversation, I think, every single time, but in any of your calculations, are you looking at embedded carbon? Because we get a lot of emails from, as councillors, from members of the public that say, that's the calculation that's very difficult to do. But if you think about, we get rid of one of our trucks, and then what is the impact on the environment of that, like just not using a vehicle any longer, and then what happens, to its parts and everything else, and then the amount of energy that goes into creating some of the new technologies. So, I mean, that I don't know that everything about that is included in an embedded carbon calculation, but is there embedded carbon calculations being done? Are there?
Thank you, Chair. Right now, not directly in terms of the strategy, but we have had some conversations in terms of really from birth to death of a unit to understand what kind of emissions that those calculations come into play, but we do not have that embedded into the strategy at this point in time.
Okay. All right. And I just actually have a comment, and that is, I do think, maybe you're just going based on some of the documents that are guiding you, but I do think 100% or zero is unrealistic when you consider embedded, right? So I see your chart that you think by 2040 you might get to 100%, and I would say, I don't know, I might say 99, I might say 93, as I think one of your numbers is, but not say 100. But that's just my thought. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of want to wrap up my comments on this just by talking about the operational requirements for our fleet, and just making sure that first and foremost, we're investing in a fleet that's going to serve the purpose that the fleet is designed to serve. I recognize that as we invest in capital, whether it be fleets and such, what we have today is better than what we invested in 15 years ago, is better than what we invested in 25 years ago. Things evolve because there's better technology that comes online at better cost ratios and such. And I recognize that we have a desire to electrify our fleet, and we're going to electrify our fleet. It's a question of how quickly we electrify our fleet. And I think that there are some risks that we're exposing ourselves depending on how we answer that question. So I just want to make sure that first and foremost, the number one thing we're doing here is we're investing in a fleet for our city vehicles that are going to meet the operational requirements that we have.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I completely agree with you. Any work that we do in replacing vehicles and life cycling vehicles is working with our operational partners to ensure that all of the operational needs for vehicles that we put into service meet the needs of the city and the service areas. And if we look at, for example, the use of hydrogen in long-term production, investments in that technology certainly will be a benefit to us, and we will not see that technology become obsolete over time. So,
okay, so as we start to move into new technology then for our fleet, we start to reduce our suppliers, we reduce our distribution chains, and that further exposes us to supply chain risk. We've seen that with the electric bus procurement process, where we're now behind by several quarters. And that is having an operational impact on transit in the city. So could you speak to what this means in terms of reducing our option space for fleet investments? And I'm especially thinking about when you're talking about heavy systems, because I'm going to assume that just on the best of days, the total number of potential suppliers for heavy equipment is limited, to then further go to heavy equipment sources that are new technology in terms of hydrogen or electric or hybrid is going to further reduce your window, which I would imagine is going to increase costs and potentially put us in a situation where we're at a supply chain risk.
Chair, maybe I'll take a stab at this one. Neil or Lila can top me up. We need to be careful when we look at the zero emission bus program. It's a very unique program where it's obviously we have a lot of funding coming from infrastructure, et cetera. And we're going through that transition. It's almost like we're all in. We're doing a mass transition, the same time as Toronto's doing a mass transition. By default, that puts a lot of pressure on the supply chain, in addition to all the other factors that we're dealing with the supply chain today. The beauty of this program is it's very agile, and to be frank, it's probably good that we do not have a lot of opportunities to electrify our heavy equipment today, because that will put a lot of strain on the system as everyone moves towards that. So it's a very surgical, pragmatic, walking type process that we're going through. And of course, operations will always be first. We also look at when we do our life cycle planning, we try and do it in a way that we're not life cycling 50 fire trucks in a year. So we try and stage and phase our life cycle of that. So we don't, Alan's operations for heavy equipment, he's got 1-year-old vehicles, 5-year-old vehicles, 10-year-old vehicles when he looks at the grader. So we don't do it all at once. So those challenges that we're facing on the zero emission bus program is very specific to that program, because the parameters of what we're doing there. That doesn't apply with this plan today. So we're ensuring that we don't add that additional risk to the process.
Does this program leverage federal grants or incentives from other levels of government?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it certainly does. We have been successful already in gaining grants in the amount of $247,000. We have applied for additional grant funding, which I believe we've just received an additional fairly large amount, which we'll be announcing soon. But we will continue to apply for different grants, particularly through FCM coming up this year when they open up their next window, particularly when it comes to hydrogen. So absolutely, that is something that we will continue to do to help reduce the burden on the city taxpayer.
Are you in a place where you can speak to supply options for this as it pertains to U.S. investments or dependency on U.S. firms?
At a high level, yes. Like as you heard me speak to at council a couple of weeks ago, as we continue to monitor the tariff issue that we're faced with, a lot of the builds of units, vehicles, specifically trucks, a chassis can start off in Kentucky. It can come across the border. We can put a piece on that chassis to build the truck. It can go back to the US again to finish the build, then come back to Canada. That's the nature of the very integrated, complex supply chain that we're dealing with. So certainly that's one of our top 5 risks in our overall tariff issues. Fleet is in that top 5 for sure that we're monitoring.
When you speak to production of hydrogen, could you kind of unpack that a little bit? Like, how is the city going to do that?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. So in this case, for production of hydrogen, we would look to use electrolysis and produce green hydrogen within the city. So we would generate our own hydrogen from scratch, compress that, and store that in order to power vehicles. So we would use electrolysis to do it by splitting water.
Okay, and that is considered zero emission from a federal funding perspective, or is it actually zero emission?
When you look at, thank you, I appreciate the comments. When we have to look at the complete cycle of the production of it, so we would look at the energy that goes into supply, the actual equipment or to run that equipment, whether that is solar or other methods in order to produce that energy. But the energy itself, we are not burning anything or in order to produce it. So we are producing pure hydrogen by splitting water.
And I think that's all my questions for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. Appreciate those questions. We have Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have questions. I might make one up on the go, but I really just want to take the opportunity to commend my appreciation for this program. This is the second time I've been briefed on it, and I was just as captured each time, probably because of the awkward standing up thing, but that's something I look forward to more of. But what I wanted to just commend you on, so very grateful for the boldness of this strategy and the way it's thought out. And I look forward to this strategy being a recipient of one of these Environmental Excellence Awards in the coming years. But one element of the strategy that I just wanted to recognize, because I have heard and I completely understand my colleagues, either at this meeting or when we were first briefed, asking about how the application of this green fleet strategy could happen with our heavy fleet vehicles. And I completely understand that these kinds of green alternatives in our heavy vehicles, whether they be snowplows or garbage trucks, are not available right now. And I don't think anyone truly expects that they are. But the agile nature of your plan as it rolls out over many years is that while you are implementing these innovations to our light and medium vehicles, you are looking at the future of what might be happening with other technologies. And I appreciate on that front that you're going to be traveling, Neil, to Edmonton to explore what that city or other cities are doing when it comes to this long-term agility that your program is going to support. And then finally, the other thing I wanted to mention, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but one element that I appreciate about this long-term plan is that you don't anticipate that there would be any new significant financial pressures for the implementation of this plan over time because of the cost savings. I see a bunch of nodding heads, so don't need to correct me, I guess, because of the cost, through the cost implementation of this. And finally, I'll just give a shout out to my colleague, Councillor Johnson, who was not here, because when we were briefed on this matter at Public Works and Infrastructure, Councillor Johnson was very appreciative of, again, the agile nature of these kinds of long-term strategies, because it's not necessarily staff saying, here is our plan written in stone for how to solve a problem whose obstacles we haven't yet foreseen. It's a plan that can be nimble and responsive over its implementation. So thank you very much and good luck to you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor, and thank you to staff for your excellent work on this. Really appreciate it. So there's no action at this point. This is just for information. So we'll see you at Council. It's on March 26th. Okay, perfect. Thank you for being here. Okay, so we're moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is the third-party infrastructure agreement report, design and construction of the Leggett Drive local water main. So we do have a brief presentation from staff and one delegation, and then we'll get into comments from members. So over to staff for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the opportunity to share with you today a brief presentation on the third-party infrastructure agreement design and construction of Leggett Drive local water main. My name is Scott LaBerge. I'm the manager, Linear Asset Management Branch, and with me today is my colleague, Kershawn Walker, who is a planner with our Strategic Initiatives Department and is the city's lead on this important development. Next slide, please. So just some background on the project. Nokia Canada is developing a 55,000 square meter mixed use campus that requires a new local water main. Currently, the property is serviced with a 610 millimeter backbone water main, along with other properties in the area. These are historical service connections to the backbone water main, which no longer meet the city's standard. In order for the development to proceed, new service connections in the area necessitate the new local water main to support the development and also to enable the city to maintain its service and reliability standards. This project that we're presenting on today was identified as part of the solution to bring this section of the system to the current standard. Next slide, please. Some details on the project. A 230-meter local water main will be constructed along Leggett Drive and connected on Terry Fox through a third-party infrastructure agreement between the city and Nokia Canada, in alignment and in accordance with Ottawa's water design guideline. Nokia Canada will undertake the design and construction, and through design and construction, the city will provide construction inspection services to ensure that the installation meets our design guidelines. Following construction, the city will assume ownership and ensure ongoing maintenance. Total capital costs on the project are $2.5 million, and the estimated timeframe for completion is 1 year. Next slide, please. Just a brief slide on next steps. So Nokia will complete the proposed works and fulfillment of the third-party agreement. Infrastructure Water Services Department, again, will provide inspection of the works to ensure that it meets city standard. And the city will provide repayment of the costs to the upset limit of $2.5 million for this work. The city has future plans to complete the remaining portion of the water main on Leggett Drive, to connect down through to Solent, to remove those services from the backbone water main and connect them to the local water main, the new local water main. This is the last slide of the presentation, and Krishan and I are happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that staff presentation. We do have one delegation before we go to questions and comments. James Scott McKillop. We've got 5 minutes, and just over here. Yeah. That one's good there. Perfect. If you can just turn your mic on there and then put your mic towards your mouth.
Good now.
We can't hear you, but just angle the mic.
Hello, how are you today?
Doing great.
I provided some slide presentations today. There we go. Okay, so I'm reading over your agreement. I'm seeing that if you go to the next slide, please. Next slide. So I'm going through, this is your own agreement here where you're giving $2.5 million to Nokia for, seems like to be water treatment. Next slide, please. If you go, as you can see here from Invest Ottawa, that there's several smart city companies here in Ottawa. You see BlackBerry, Ericsson, Nokia. If you go to the next slide, please. There's Nokia there, the National Research Council of Canada. Nokia then goes on to say how their water utilities are involved with the industrial internet of things. Next slide, please. Here's some more information from Nokia regarding their digital water strategies. If you can see number 12 there, they bring up this in their digital futures and how they're involved with these water leaders. Next slide, please. They bring up several different technologies involved, not just sensor technology and smart meters, but also a thing called digital twins. Next slide, please. So I guess these water utilities can also deliver smart meters can also monitor, according to Nokia, monitor our water consumption. And it seems they've already been doing this if you're to believe their own documents. Next slide, please. This is coming from the International Telecommunications Union and it'll be written by Ericsson. It's also another smart city company in Ottawa on how they're digitalize water in smart cities and how telecommunications can be used for environmental resilience. They get into several different technologies. Next slide, please. And not just digital twins, they also bring up microwaves and more sensor technology, smart sensors. Next slide, please. This is from the National Research Council of Canada. They claim that this smart infrastructure is part of the water food nexus. The number 27, that screenshot, you can see this is from the National Research Council of Canada too. Smart city solutions keep water supplies safe. Next slide, please. National Research Council also bring up how the Internet of Things and machine learning and artificial intelligence can be added to these water solutions. Next slide, please. This is more stuff from the National Research Council of Canada. They get into real-time environmental monitoring. They bring up a thing called biosensors and the Internet of Things in this document. Next slide, please. They also bring up how this is being used in municipalities throughout Canada now, it looks like. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting character, Francois Collier. He is a member of the IEC, IEEE, ISO, and Standards Council of Canada. He claims that the Internet of Things and digital twin technologies are also involved with a thing called biodigital convergence. And they get into environmental monitoring, smart city solutions, the food supply, several different technologies, nanotechnologies involved with this. Next slide, please. This would be part, according to Francois, of the Smart Everything Everywhere plan. She can see also has behavior modification. Brings up how this digital water is involved with environmental monitoring. It gets into cloud-based smart cities, smart sensors, biosensors. Next slide, please.
Sir, I'll just ask you to wrap up because your 5 minutes is up. Last slide, please.
This is Francois Collier's work again, and if people read this document, it's one of his most recent ones. He talks about how this is involved with human augmentation. Thank you for the time here today. I would love to have some questions. And if you don't have any questions, the City Council doesn't, and anybody's watching this, my name is James Scott McKillop. My phone number is 613-981-7718. And I can be found at 315 Wilbrod Street at Barely Bruised Books. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the delegation. I'm not seeing questions at the moment. We'll move into comments and questions from committee of the city staff. Councillor Curry, I know this is in your ward, and perhaps you'd like to start us off.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I first want to thank very much Krishan Walker and Scott. It has been a pleasure. It has been an absolute pleasure to work on these complex projects. I mean, obviously, I'm not doing much at all. They're doing it all, but just hearing from companies, staff at Nokia, just how wonderful it is to work with our city staff. It's always great to hear that. So I wanted to make that comment right off the bat. The other thing I wanted to say, just as an overall comment, is I'm really appreciative of, and I said this before, the Strategic Initiatives Department in general, because I want to call this sort of the knee bone is connected to the shin bone comment by me, because really and truly, when you look at this, what happened was Nokia had to compete against another city, right? To say, are we going to locate in Ottawa or in another city in the US, right? And so the difference maker was that our staff, people like Krishan and Scott, said, we will shepherd you through this planning process and it will be easier, right? And so Nokia chose Ottawa. But then it doesn't stop there, right? And so an example like this is water main. Nokia is saying, okay, now how difficult is it to actually get moving with our project, right? And it isn't just Nokia that's following this, it's every other company as well, saying, how easy is it to move to Ottawa, set up, get things done more quickly, right? Because in business, people want things to move as quickly as possible. So I know that there are other companies watching this, and they're saying to me, wow, I'm amazed at how quickly this Nokia project is going. That kind of messaging goes back up the chain to higher executives in other companies that then have to make a case. And we know there are other companies making a case to say, we'd like to locate in Ottawa, or we could locate in the US, and who has the better processes and who can help us more. So I can't thank this department enough. The other thing I will say is, so they're going to replace this water main, right? But while they're at it, I know those are the four most expensive words or whatever it is in a renovation, but in this case, while they're at it, this will help them install other things like fiber, where, because this will be an innovation and research district, if we want to have things like robots sweeping the sidewalk, I always give the example, right, where they will need to charge somewhere, these robots. If they want to have sensors on the garbage cans that tell city staff, hey, this garbage is full, this all needs connectivity, right? So while they're at it, this is enabling that. And really, as you see from this report, Nokia is leading this, right, and paying for it. They have already very quickly tried to gather up everyone who might be involved in this type of project to make sure that everything's done right from the very beginning, right? So I just want to sort of share some of that with you, just so you can appreciate how important it is that we have people like Krishan, Scott, the Strategic Initiatives Department that are looking at it much more broadly from a bigger perspective, understanding how the knee bone is connected to the shin bone, right? And I could go further. If we happen to have a need for another industry based on the current climate, this will enable that. The compound semiconductor industry that will also benefit from having Nokia there, right? Having other companies there that are all a part of the compound semiconductor industry, which leads to our argument to the province, to the federal government, that we need grants or funding to set up a compound semiconductor industry. So as I say, it's all connected, but it starts with projects like this. It starts with the great people we have here at the City of Ottawa that are making a huge difference in terms of economic development. And I love that that is a component of this report, that it lays it out. I didn't have to explain all of this. I'm sure you all read the report, but I did want to highlight that section of the report. Anyway, overall, I'm thrilled beyond belief. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Curry, and that overview of some of the process. It's appreciated. Any other questions or comments? Okay, is that item carried? Okay, thank you very much. There are no in-camera items. We're going to move now to the motion which notice has been previously been given. Councillor King previously gave notice at the February 18th Environment and Climate Change Committee, and is replacing, after meetings with staff, a revised motion pursuant to subsection 59.5 of the procedure bylaw. So I'll move it over to Councillor King for the change in the introduction.
Thank you so much, Chair. Today I want to present a motion concerning a critical environmental issue that affects our entire city, the use of road salt on Ottawa's roads, sidewalks, and multi-use paths. Initially introduced as an in-depth inquiry at our last meeting, the motion before us has been revised after input from council colleagues and after an in-depth and insightful presentation provided by public works staff to the chair, vice chair, and my office. As we all know, Ottawa experiences harsh winters that necessitate the use of de-icing agents to maintain public safety. Road salt has long been our primary tool in this effort. Every winter, thousands of tons of salt are spread across our transportation network to keep our residents safe. While public safety must remain our top priority, we cannot ignore the mounting evidence of environmental damage caused by excessive road salt use. The chloride from road salt doesn't simply disappear when the snow melts. It flows into our storm sewers, our rivers, our groundwater, and our soil. Organizations such as the Ottawa Riverkeeper and Ecology Ottawa have raised significant concerns about the rising chloride levels in our water systems. These elevated levels pose threats to aquatic ecosystems, plant life, and potentially our drinking water sources. Once salt enters our waterways, it's not easily removed through conventional water treatment methods. Beyond environmental concerns, excessive salt use also accelerates infrastructure damage. Our bridges, roads, and buildings all suffer from salt-induced corrosion, increasing maintenance costs and shortening the lifespan of our public assets. But I want to be clear here. This motion is not about eliminating the use of road salt. As a winter city, it's firstly about fact-finding. So as a city, we can ensure the right balance between maintaining public safety and protecting our environment. It's about ensuring we're using best practices, applying the right amounts of road salt, and at the right times with the right methods. Specifically, this motion's resolutions state, and this is the revised resolutions, therefore be it resolved that city staff be directed to conduct a focused review of Ottawa's road salt use with a specific emphasis on its environmental impact, particularly its effect on local waterways, and be it further resolved that staff report back on the following: the measures taken by the city's Public Works Department to ensure salt application aligns with environmental and climate change considerations while maintaining public safety. 2, an assessment conducted on the environmental impact of current salt use levels and the mitigation strategies in place. 3, methods used to monitor the impact of road salt on Ottawa's waterways, including rivers, lakes, and groundwater. 4, steps taken to mitigate salt runoff into waterways and whether the city filters salt-infused snow at municipal snow dumps to minimize environmental contamination. 5, the feasibility of incorporating road salt management into the Ottawa River Action Plan, given the documented concerns regarding chloride contamination in waterways. And 6, that the city's salt management plan be made available online for public access and transparency. As we know, many municipalities across Canada are already implementing innovative approaches to reduce salt impacts while maintaining safe winter conditions. These include pre-wetting salt to improve its effectiveness and reduce the total amount needed, using brine applications before storms, exploring alternative de-icing materials, implementing precision application technologies, and improving training for salt application operators. As a city committed to environmental sustainability, climate resilience, and the protection of local ecosystems, we should continually explore these approaches since we have a responsibility to ensure our winter maintenance practices align with these values. I'm pleased that staff is working with groups such as Ottawa Riverkeeper and Ecology Ottawa and continue to explore new technologies such as electric controls for our entire fleet of sidewalk spreaders to reduce the amount of road salt usage. This motion represents an opportunity for the committee, council, and the public to obtain more data in order to take more thoughtful evidence-based approaches to winter maintenance that protects both our residents and our environment. It's about ensuring careful evaluation and continuous improvement. I believe we can maintain safe winter conditions while better protecting our waterways, soil, vegetation, and infrastructure for future generations. I welcome your support for this motion and would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for putting that on the table. We do have one delegation that I want to make sure we get to speak and ask any questions of. That's William Van Geest with Executive Director of Ecology Ottawa. William. You've got 5 minutes to address committee.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am audible, I gather.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to address you. I'd like to, great, thank you so much. I've got the PowerPoint up there. I'd like to begin with salt in our waterways. So as you know, as the Councillor King mentioned, Ottawa Riverkeeper has done valuable work on this issue. They've taken over 500 water samples at 45 sites from 2019 to 2024. Pardon me. But before discussing their results, we need to discuss two important thresholds for chloride concentration, chronic toxicity and acute toxicity. Next slide, please. So chronic toxicity is when chloride concentrations are between 120 milligrams per liter and 640 milligrams per liter for more than 4 days. Acute toxicity, worse, is when chloride concentrations are higher than 640 milligrams per liter, independent of duration. Chronic toxicity typically isn't immediately fatal to biodiversity, although prolonged levels will have deleterious effects. Acute toxicity, by contrast, is potentially fatal for organisms. They will die even if high levels aren't prolonged. Now to the results of Riverkeeper's work. The next slide shows chloride concentrations across the 5 seasons that Riverkeeper has tested, the last 5 winters. I'll draw your attention to the bottom of the figure, to the 2 dotted lines. I think you can see them from here. There's the green one and the red one. The green is chronic toxicity, and the red one is acute toxicity. That is, any readings above the green line is toxic, and anything above the red line is very toxic. I'll also draw your attention to the blue boxes there. Those represent the chloride concentrations of the middle 50% of lab-tested samples, so between 25 and 75%. You'll notice that every one of the blue boxes there at least touches the acute toxicity line, and one of them in 2019, so the first column, clears that line completely. Again, very toxic. Riverkeeper reports that, quote, out of all samples collected, about 45% exceeded the threshold for acute toxicity, 45%. They also report that, next slide, please, 15 samples in Ottawa surpassed 5,000 milligrams per liter, with the highest reaching 25,000 milligrams per liter. Just recall again that the threshold for acute toxicity is 640 milligrams per liter. So chloride levels in our waterways are toxic, sometimes extremely so. But how do chloride levels play out across the year? The next slide shows sampling by month. You'll see the familiar green and red threshold lines in the bottom, and that the blue boxes are all above the chronic toxicity line again. There's a line for median in there, but I don't think you'll see it from here. What the chart shows then is that high chloride levels persist throughout the year. This in turn suggests that chloride is slowly being released from groundwater and soil, which in turn suggests that salt is accumulating in our ecosystem. I want to briefly touch on infrastructure. So we know that the NCC is replacing the Alexandra Bridge principally because of damage from road salt. Next slide. The cost of this replacement, $800 million, according to a 2018 estimate, and so it's probably climbed significantly since then. One reason we rely so much on salt is because it's cheap, about $65 per ton. If we factored in ecosystem and infrastructure damage, to say nothing of damage to personal property like vehicles and clothing, would we make this same decision? Finally, it must be acknowledged that we're doing something wrong in Ottawa in particular. An article published in The Citizen in January reported that the City of Ottawa uses more road salt than any other Canadian municipality. This is not, I think you'll agree with me, the type of leadership that we want. But the Ottawa community knows that our salt use is excessive. They brought oversalting to our attention earlier this year, to Ecology Ottawa's attention, particularly but not exclusively in OC Transpo facilities. As we contacted city officials, community members sent us dozens of photos of egregious oversalting. I've included a couple in the next slides. Of course, after, oh, I'm sorry, one more slide down. Oh, I guess we missed a couple of years. Sorry about that. We should be, yeah, next one I think is the images that we received. Oh, my bad. Okay, so that's the article reported. And next slide. One more. So as we contacted city officials, community members sent dozens of photos to us of egregious oversalting. After Sunday's rains, of course, all the salt that you see in these photos, there's one more slide of them, is now seeping into our soil and making its way into our waterways. Very briefly on Councillor King's motion, it fundamentally asks for information. We believe that the foregoing more than makes a case that the review you to wrap up. Sure, that the review he calls for is necessary. We do have a few additional recommendations, but for now, I'll simply ask that you support this request for information. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Councillor Brockington has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the delegation this morning. I think you answered my question in your very last statement, because you said you support Councillor King's motion. You believe that more information is is required, but what's the ultimate objective or goal? What do you ultimately want to see? I agree there's multiple examples of oversalting, but we're a city that will receive 200 centimeters of snow. We get freezing rain, freeze-thaw cycles, older population. What do we ultimately want to see here? If we want to reduce our salt, what's the alternative? So what does Ecology Ottawa want to see at the end here?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. I think that, for example, the photos that I show demonstrate a need for room for a dramatic reduction in our salt use. There's all sorts of excellent standards. Riverkeeper has some. There's the Smart About Salt standards. There's Conservation Ontario has some good standards. The images that you've seen and that folks have been sending us in the dozens demonstrate that the current application practices just go way beyond what those standards would suggest. So we could accomplish a lot simply by following basic standards that are widely available. There are a number of different kind of tweaks that can be done in terms of what substance is used. Of course, removal of precipitation, whether that's snow or ice. And I know that the city is pursuing those. To their credit, they gave a webinar a couple of weeks ago about some of the steps that they're taking. But that I think is more kind of tweaking. At this point, it's just egregious levels. And Ottawa Riverkeeper also showed in the report that Gatineau, so literally across the river from us, is using about 2/3 the amount of salt that Ottawa is. So we can talk about different conditions in different cities, but if across the river from us, they're able to have significant reductions, we know that that's possible here. I also want to point out that the city of Gatineau is also making provisions for ecologically vulnerable areas, and that's another kind of easy win that the city could make here. Again, Ottawa Riverkeeper has some fantastic information about where those areas would be.
Perfect. Thanks for your delegations. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockton. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your delegation and for your advocacy around ensuring that the public is more involved in terms of our salt management at the city. I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on elements of public education and also the need for more disclosure around our salt management policies at the city.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor. And if I may, I just want to applaud your motion today, but also the inquiry at last meeting. I'm not sure I've seen an inquiry that's so comprehensive and just kind of very straightforwardly deals with environmental impacts. So we called attention to public education in the petition that we formed based on the feedback that we got from community members about the salting practices that they were flagging. Public education is really important, I think, because obviously it's not just city and OC Transpo facilities where salting occurs, but salting occurs across the city by private landowners, whether residential or commercial. And of course, it's less easy to regularize. There is no salt management plan to my knowledge, according to which residential and commercial property owners apply salt. And I think folks will often err on the side of excessive salt application, just to be sure, right? As you yourself have flagged, public safety is obviously critical with salt application. So we and Ottawa Riverkeeper, who's done great work on this public education issue, think that there's all sorts of opportunity for educating folks on how to reduce their salt, whether again that's fiscal means or simply using only the necessary amount of salt or using it in certain conditions and that sort of thing. Again, there are great resources available, and it's super cheap. As you well know, educational interventions from the city's budgetary standpoint are among the cheapest to do. So we think that would be a great investment of funds. To the question of the availability of the city's documents as they pertain to salt management, this was interesting actually. Early when I was kind of investigating the situation, I did look for what documents were available and noticed a reference, I think it was in the aughts, to a salt management plan. And I, poked around as much as I could and found, no such plan. And I thought, this is weird. What sort of secrets must be buried in the salt management plan that it's not publicly available? So I was pleased to see that in your motion, and I think this is something in general that we'd love to see more of, is simple transparency with these sorts of things from the city.
I appreciate that answer. I think we see other municipalities such as Toronto that have published salt management plans, and I think it provides a little bit more detail to the public as to the rationale, which I would argue is sound from the city, ensuring that there's a balance between public safety and also addressing environmental concerns. I think it helps when there's more sunshine that opens up so that the public can understand the application and the use, and also access to public education materials. I was only able to find one brochure on the city's website that did deal with private residents in the use of salt, but I think it should be centralized, it should be more prominent, and there should be more materials that really outline the way that we can cut down on salt use, not just by the city's application, but also the use by residents, which I hear a call from residents as well. I appreciate the work that Ecology Ottawa has really undertaken on this file and the advocacy. I think it's important because it dovetails with that of residents, frankly, as well. Unprompted, residents who did not know that I had brought the inquiry. And I must say that was a team effort, frankly, with the vice chair and talking with others. So it wasn't just myself, but there was general interest because, unprompted, going into community organizations and community association meetings, people were asking me, not knowing that there was an inquiry, what are we doing about salt? In fact, I went to a community association meeting where somebody had just, walked down some local streets and they felt that the sidewalks were oversalted. And they asked me, what are you doing? And I said, well, literally last week, we looked at an inquiry. So I think it is of importance, and it's a question of balance, ensuring that we can create a balance between safety, but also all the ecological considerations that are required. But I just wanted to thank you for your work and for your advocacy on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. Thank you, Vice Chair.
If I may, Councillor, just a quick follow-up on that. With the chair's permission, I think just to reinforce a couple of points, the public education component of the release of the salt management plan, I think, is really important. I think folks are also, beyond oversalting, some folks are concerned about undersalting, and having that management plan available and justifications available to them, I think, is just a great idea. And we're always pushing for public education. Just to the point, again, about property owners and their salting, it's in everyone's interest that everybody reduce salt. If for no other reason than the cost to infrastructure. And I think that really needs to be underscored. I think the EPA estimated it's $5 billion annually in salt damage to across the U.S. So we've asked in our petition for a cost assessment, not only environmental damage, which is substantial, as you point out, but infrastructure damage as well. I think this will highlight to folks I think very pressing need to reduce salt. there's something else too, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for your delegation today, and thank you to my colleague for bringing this motion forward. This is something that my residents have raised as well. And I appreciate that you're also talking about commercial properties, because that's something like shopping malls and other places where there's big piles of salt, and that's an education right there. They're trying to make sure that nobody slips and falls outside their buildings, but the other side of it is that sometimes it's overkill. I wanted to know, in terms of alternatives, and you're talking about, you can tweak things. I like that term, but the use of grit and just mixing it in is, I think that helps a lot. But I don't know what your comments are on that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Absolutely, grit, has its place. It's worth pointing out as well that conventional road salt starts losing its efficacy at -7 degrees, and about -10 it just kind of bottoms out. And there's some evidence to show, in fact, that it makes things worse below those temperatures. So certainly grit would be necessary or very helpful in those sorts of situations. There are other substances that are available, like calcium chloride, like magnesium chloride. I think it's quite expensive, that one. And then, brines and your normal kind of experimental substances that cities, even like Toronto, have been successful applying. As you underscored yourself, I think these sorts of changes are more tweaks. The type of evidence that we're seeing is just, no science necessary. We're talking about a thick layer of salt. Plenty of room for just real basic reductions, and we should be talking about technology and different substances at the same time, but there's some real low-hanging fruit in terms of salt reductions.
Thank you. I think that we all have a love-hate relationship with salt, because if it wasn't there and you're slipping and sliding on a sidewalk or whatever, as a liaison for older adults, I hear about that we didn't do it, in a certain area, we didn't put something down to keep them from slipping, which is very scary and a reality. So we have to have that balance of something that prevents that. So no, appreciate it. One of the things I'm hoping to see, and I have talked to staff and I've met with them, and I appreciate their taking the time to do that, is why are we not doing the monitoring? Like working together. I don't think it should, it's an outside organization. I appreciate it, but we should know what's going on with our water. So I hope there could be some collaboration on the level.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, this is one of the things actually we asked in our petition. That, for the record, we haven't submitted yet to the clerk. But Ottawa Riverkeeper does this monitoring already. I'm sure they would love to ramp up, but the infrastructure is in place. So this would be a very easy way for the city to get good data. But I think one way or another, we do need those numbers. We do need that data, and that will help with issues like cost assessment as well. To know the numbers across the city, and to help protect more ecologically vulnerable areas.
Yeah, and I see it because I'm in Bay Ward. We're right on the water. So, and we see that water shooting out, and I wonder about the salt content. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you to Councillor King for bringing the motion, which I certainly will be supporting. And thank you to Public Works staff who have already made some good progress on this issue. I certainly do appreciate the innovations that our Public Works team have found over the years through better technological monitoring, through greater use of data. And with this motion, I think what I'm looking for staff to embrace is the opportunity it provides us so that we might continue doing that good work. Because as many Canadian cities have found, there can be significant long-term benefits from continued improvements on the use of salt on our infrastructure. And so while Councillor King's motion and certainly Mr. Van Geest's presentation absolutely speaks to the harmful effects that salt can have on our environment, which is quite clear, I want to draw attention to how the excessive use of salt has as a corrosive, detrimental effect on our municipal infrastructure. And this was mentioned by the delegate. Whether it's damage to our roads and pathways, to our fleet of vehicles, to our bridges, namely a very expensive maintenance bill for the Alexandra Bridge, where 6 decades of salt use has brought an end to that historic asset. Anything that's made of steel, that's made of cement, that's made of asphalt is vulnerable to the corrosive effects of salt. The more salt we use, the greater the corrosion, the greater the corrosion, the greater the risk, both to the lifespan of the infrastructure as well as the cost to maintain it. And that's what I want to focus on here, because while the value in Councillor King's motion is that it can help us collect data and discuss the possibility of alternative options so that we can make the best long-term financial decisions on whether to continue using excessive amounts of road salt due to its low cost, or whether we need to take a look at the long-term costs of increased infrastructure maintenance or renewal, and to consider further improvements and alternatives. Because yes, there absolutely are other Canadian cities, winter Canadian cities, as close as Gatineau, that face the same exact challenges we face, and they use other practices. Since the motion doesn't, in my opinion, pose an onerous level of work to respond to, since the potential benefits of this motion are so significant and wide-ranging, I will certainly be supporting it, and I hope that my committee colleagues do as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair. I appreciate that. And, you know, we'll just go for the quick answers there, William, if that's okay. I just wanted to know, it seems like there's been a lot of properties highlighted. They're private properties, they're condo properties. Obviously, I think we've established, and when we get to questions to staff, the mountains of snow and salt that we're seeing in the bus shelters, which are not part of Public Works. They're maintained by a separate group. Those are really environmental related provincial issues. So on that, to be able to get compliance with the private people, because they, trust me, they don't want to spend money on salt either, but guess what? Lawyers are expensive and people get sued, and seniors don't want slip and falls. That being said, have you made your advocacy to Catherine McKenney, to MPPs in respect to that? Because we are creatures of the province and they're the ones that control that level. Have you made the same pitch to them, and what's your advocacy on that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor. That's a great point. There's all sorts of room for work at other levels of government. So we are working with a coalition of advocacy groups in Ontario to do exactly this, to call on the province to enact standards according to which, you know, contractors or anyone else will conduct salt application. And apparently, from what I hear from other coalition members, the province is interested in this and making moves to do that. So that would be really very helpful. One issue in particular is limited liability. So this would entail something like a course that contractors would take. If they take the course and, you know, go about their salt application, and say someone unfortunately does fall and wants to sue them, they would be their liability would be limited because they had taken that certification course and abided by.
Yeah, William, I'm going to stop you there because I don't think either one of us are lawyers. But trust me, they get rich and they know what they're doing. People don't want to salt, trust me. So again, can you tell me the names of the MPPs that you've contacted in the city of Ottawa already? Just because I'm going to follow up with them.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we haven't had contact yet. We were kind of letting the dust settle from the recent election, but it's high on our list to do.
Good. And if you can follow up with them and let me know specifically who, because really it comes down to the private properties and the inside the bus terminals, like our stations, where we're seeing the challenges. Even though it's outside of my wheelhouse, I know that our public works team has been working with OC Transport to make sure they do a much better job. But the condos is a big issue. I see mountains of snow as well. I also have a condo my mother lives in, and there's mountains of salt. And I've even brought it up, and they're like, yeah, we're not getting sued. So if you can follow up with me after you've spoken with those MPPs, I'll follow up with them as well, because I think it's great advocacy from a provincial point of view, but we literally have no control over shopping centers and condos and all that sort of stuff. But thank you for coming out and speaking today.
I'd be delighted to. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much for your delegation answering all of those questions. Okay, so now it's time for any questions of staff or any comments members would like to make. Councillor Tierney, is that a new hand?
It is new hand, but you probably don't want me back to back, so we'll let Councillor Curry go first, and I can go second. That's fine.
Whatever you prefer.
Let's do that.
Councillor Curry, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a couple of quick questions. Like this motion, I don't see any problem with it. It's simply having staff report back. I think we can get a lot of good information from it. I wanted to ask staff for number 4, that obviously you report back on the following, the steps taken to mitigate salt runoff. I'm wondering if that would ever include heated, not necessarily sidewalks. I joke that we have sidewalks that are heated in Canada. We don't. But there are such things as heated mats. I know people get them for their driveways so they don't have to shovel. Is that a possibility for things like our OC Transpo platforms? I understand that some of our platforms are heated and then the new ones potentially are not. And I know when we did our tour there was significant salt. So I wonder, is that going to be a part of this reporting back? Would we look at that, like technologies?
Chair, we're always looking at technologies. I'm not sure that the mats is necessarily something that's coming to mind right now. Some of the platforms would fall under OC Transpo. I would say that the only areas where we have heated infrastructure are parking ramps. For example, the parking ramp here to City Hall is a heated ramp. Now, we have looked in the past at heating some of the sidewalks and to see, okay, the feasibility of that, and unfortunately in our, not just our climate, but also the fact that we have a lot of areas where we have cuts through the sidewalks to be able to provide connections to buildings, it was just deemed to be not feasible in our context.
Yeah, honestly, I can appreciate it. Wouldn't be feasible everywhere all over the city. That'd be wild. I really was mostly thinking about OC Transpo. So in this report, would it address some of the, OC Transpo is not us, but it kind of is. Would it be included in that report? I guess that's because someone has told me that some of our platforms for our OC Transpo stations are heated and some are not.
So, Chair, what we can commit to is to follow up with OC Transpo on that, and we can certainly include that as part of our reporting. But to your point, this is something that does fall under OC Transpo's purview. But we can certainly provide basically the information that they would share around. Do they have any stations that are currently with heated platforms, where they're located?
That would be helpful to me. I mean, just as much information as we can get. But otherwise, I look forward to the results that come from this report. So thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. And yeah, Councillor King adjusted the motion to be focused as much as possible on the environmental outcomes for this committee. Certainly, Transit Committee also. There's inquiries and questions there too. So just ask councillors to keep it on the motion here. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. So a couple of questions to staff. First of all, is there anything in here that would lead, or are we making any decisions, or is this just a pure study that may sit on a shelf? But I'm not saying it's irrelevant. I'm curious. There's no implications for what we do as a service being made by this resolution coming forward today. Is that correct?
Chair, as I understand from the motion, it's really for us to report back on our practices related to salt and the salt impacts and the alternatives that we've looked at. So I see this more as a reporting back than a direction to change our practices.
Great, and thank you, Alain, for that. And as I've indicated in the Vice Chair of Public Works, where I feel strongly, if we want to do education on what we own, I'm looking forward to a salt management practice, what we do on our city streets, our city roads. Obviously, OC Transpo's in their own wheelhouse, so maybe Councillor Gower can explain what's happening with that from the OC perspective, and private properties. At least this report may help spur on a provincial thing. But Public Works, we will have a presentation that we've been talking about. Is that correct? In the near future, to be able to talk about the great work you're doing in spreading. And I think there's always a disconnect on grit between salt. We actually do apply grit and salt. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we actually do have pretty strict practices for what we do in our wheelhouse, the Public Works wheelhouse. But I think our friends at OC have to clean up, and certainly private property. So is that something we can bring to Public Works, is a full presentation and maybe a tour with some of the people to see how effective we are on the salt management practices in our snow machines as well. I think that's important. We did a tour with most people and they really respect it, as I do, but I don't think there's a full understanding.
Hi, Chair. Certainly in terms of the presentation at PWIC, yes, we're definitely open to doing a presentation at PWIC.
Okay, great. And so again, especially with winter quality maintenance standards coming up, is there anything that would come of this would interfere? Because I'm just thinking engagement wise, the Council on Aging, which I've been very tight with ever since transit, and now I feel I have a permanent seat on that board. I want to hear from them, and I want to hear from seniors if we change any of our very restrictive salt practices on our public sidewalks at this point. And I think that's very important. So just to be clear, there's nothing, this is just a study. This will not impact any decisions that we make unless it comes through Public Works or through Finance or through Council, correct?
Chair, yeah, again, I interpret the motion as a reporting back on our practices. I think there is an opportunity, and certainly having had discussions with Councillor King, in terms of increasing the information that we are sharing with the public around the great practices that we do have in place. Are there areas for improvement? There's always areas for improvement, but we also have good practices in place. And I think this is a good opportunity to be able to have more information that's available in the public domain.
Excellent. And I see Councillor King nodding his head there too. So I assume the mover of the motion, that is his understanding as well. This is a good education exercise, just like back in the days we talked about leaving green bins open so the birds could eat out of it or whatever the case may be. But really at the end of the day, this is about education and really getting people to know about salt use in the city. Is the mover comfortable with that? Is that correct in my assertion?
That's correct. I think in order for us to better manage, we need quality information.
Fair enough. Absolutely. And I just want to make sure, because I've had a lot of seniors contact me already that feel we don't salt enough. So I don't want to get into this bun fight about public easements. And I think Public Works, when we do have a full report on what the city does, that would be great. Maybe OC can do one for themselves. And then overall, maybe some of what's based out of this study will help Ecology Ottawa go to the provincial representatives that actually do have a hammer about condos, commercial properties, and what they use. They use salt because it's cheap, and they know that they're not going to get sued. Maybe if the province wants to touch that one, I don't know if they would, that would be in their wheelhouse, kind of like lawn sprays. All those things falls in their wheelhouse. So let them do the work, not us. But thank you very much for this, and look forward to the rest of the debate and discussion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff. They did give me a briefing, and I really appreciated it. It's I've got both sides of the arguments. I've got older adults who are terrified if there's not salt put down, and we've got people concerned about the amount of salt. So we have to come to a sensible solution in the middle. And I appreciated that that was repeated by Ecology Ottawa. We're not totally eliminating, but we're being very careful. And one of the things is commercial properties. That was a big factor. And we don't have control over them, so we have to do more education on that. I appreciate it. But I mentioned about grit being mixed in, and that's something that I find that is well accepted because sometimes people don't have very good eyesight and they can't tell if there's salt put down, but if you see grit, you feel comfortable that you can walk on that area. So this is for sidewalks and not so much for roads. And if that's being looked at as well.
Chair, so we do use grit currently. So basically our two main products are salt and grit. Both of them fulfill very different perspective, but also complementary functions. So we typically use salt if we're kind of in the colder temperatures, but not in the extreme cold. We do start to increase the amount of grit that we use when we get into the much colder temperatures where salt becomes a lot less effective. We will also use grit more onto the sidewalks where we're not able to get a bare surface condition to make sure that we're increasing the traction for the sidewalk. So the reality is basically we use both, just under very different circumstances. And I believe that we shared with committee a few years ago that we essentially have moved away from sand and more towards grit. We still use a bit of sand, but predominantly grit, just because we are getting a lot better traction and also less impacts in terms of the environment about the salt getting into our waterways.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I guess the big concern is how to monitor. And I think that residents feel uncomfortable with the fact that it was a third party that was monitoring to find out how it's affecting our waterways. And you know, we live right near the river. Bay Ward is right along the side of the river, and people see that, you know, the accumulation of the stormwater going out. So is there a possibility to work together with these third parties to monitor it? I think if we're going to see how we're doing, we need to, as a city, be on top of the monitoring itself. So are we going to work together?
So Chair, absolutely. And I'll start and then I'll have my colleague Tammy fill in with the remaining details, because we are working closely with our partners in infrastructure and water services. We do work closely with the Ottawa River keepers. Basically, we have regular meetings with them. There's a series of recommendations that they also provided that we are aligned to. So there is close collaboration with those partners, but I'll let Tammy speak to what we're also doing as a city from a monitoring perspective.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have a baseline water quality sampling and monitoring program of our water environment within the City of Ottawa. Right now, we have approximately 115 locations that we do monitor. We do this in close collaboration with the 3 conservation authorities within our geographic area. The data is also available on open data on Ottawa. So we are happy to continue with that collaboration, and we are always open to having those conversations as well with the riverkeeper.
I appreciate that, so that we can see when we change our techniques, what's working, what isn't working. I think that's really important. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Jared. Thank you to Councillor King for the motion. I think it's important. I'm glad it's a motion. I know we had some discussion last month about a direction, but I think because of the volume of research and information being requested, a motion's appropriate. Mr. General Manager, how long have we used salt in the City of Ottawa?
Oh boy, as long as I can remember. Salt has always been kind of used as a product. I can't say the year that the city started, but it's been a widely used practice for many, many decades.
And thank you. That was my understanding. And what is the cyclical review that you do looking at other products or materials that are on the market, are used by other municipalities, would be appropriate for climates like Ottawa's? What do you just normally do on a regular basis? Because I'm no longer on this committee, but we've had this discussion before. This is probably the third time in 10 years I've been part of this type of discussion where we talk about products used in Ottawa and we want to reduce the environmental impact. I'm on board for that. But can you just, I know this will be part of your report to us, but just high level, can you comment on what your department does in this regard?
Chair, I'll give a brief overview, and when we respond back to the motion, we can certainly fill more of the detail. I would say that the team is really focused on two main elements. One is the review of alternative products, and we're always scoping out to see what are other municipalities doing, what are products that are out there. If there's a pilot that's needed, we will pilot some of those products, but we will also try to look at, before we get to that stage, to see how readily available is it, to see, okay, how practical is it to apply on a broader scale. But if it's available more for certain specific circumstances, we're always open to that. I would say where we focus a lot of our time and attention also is around how do we minimize the amount of salt that we're using. And examples to that is basically our staff go through training every year related to salt, how to control salt, how to minimize the use of salt, how to apply salt. All of our major equipment, our big combo trucks, are all equipped with sophisticated controllers that control the amount of salt. And those decisions are based on what the supervisors call for in terms of the application rate. And one of the areas that we have actually been tried to advance is related to sidewalk plowing. The reality is that technology has not existed in the past for controllers on sidewalk plows. And our staff were actually kind of pioneers in this area, working with manufacturers to manufacture controllers that can be used in sidewalk equipment, and we actually piloted those this winter. So as we get through the results from that pilot, we'll be able to also report back in terms of how we see that moving forward. But the use of those controllers is really around how do we minimize the amount of salt that's being applied. Okay, so those are just a few examples, Councillor.
Yeah, I do remember the beet juice pilot a few years ago, but I appreciate that. I don't want to add to the motion, but I don't know if there's a correlation between lack of salt use and slips and falls or accidents, and whether municipalities that use salt on a regular basis have fewer per capita. I don't know if there's a correlation there, but similar to Councillor Kavanaugh's point, I have a number of residents who want to be mobile in the winter. We encourage people getting out in the winter. We say we prioritize certain pathways to bus stops and around seniors' homes, and we want to make sure it's safe. So it's striking that balance. The last thing I'll just comment, and Councillor Curry, to your question, I went to a Canadian solar conference a few years ago, and they have a lot of interesting products, as you might imagine, but solar powered heated sidewalks, where you reconstruct the sidewalk, you put rods. It's kind of like a hockey rink with the cooling rods. This would be a solar powered rod under the sidewalk. And again, in maybe priority areas where you have vulnerable pedestrians, you test that out. And so to the GM's point, there may be issues where you have to dig out the sidewalk, but it's literally ice-free, snow-free, just like those sloped ramps that we see that have no snow on them in the winter. So I'll dig that information out, share it with people who want to see it, but it's interesting. And I wanted to mention that technology is available and is being used in climates similar to Ottawa. So thanks to Councillor King for the motion. And when it comes to council, I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to confirm with staff, if you could just clearly articulate to me, do we or do we not have a salting policy in the city?
Councillor, we have a salt management plan, and we also have an application policy or salt application policy that we use now. I would say it's more of an operational policy, an operational plan, but yes, we do have it in place.
Is that a document that for some reason we would not make publicly available, or is that something that if somebody wanted to have that information, they could get that information?
So, Chair, part of the discussion with Councillor, the councillor that was brought up was around the lack of publicly available information. We certainly discussed about publishing our salt management plans. They tend to be very operationally focused. So one of the things out of this initiative that we are looking at is how do we make more information available publicly, but that's also more publicly consumable than a 70-page technical document. Still convey the important elements of the plan, but in a way that's more consumable by the members of the public.
Okay, thank you for that. With regard to stormwater and stormwater management, what currently do we have that technologically can help us with the removal of dissolved salts, if anything? Or is that part of this study that you're going to be looking at?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our stormwater management facilities are designed to have particles settle to the bottom of the ponds. So anything that would be diluted as part of the water, currently there is no treatment for dissolving or taking out any of those solubles.
Okay. I guess my last comment would be that to me, I think it's a valid point that Councillor Tierney was making earlier about, higher levels of government in this and the discussion that we have, because really this, I think, is a question of risk management, and it's not one that's unique to the city of Ottawa. As much as we have smart people over here that are going to go forth and do a study based on this motion, I'm thinking that probably there's smart people doing similar analyses in Edmonton and Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal and all that kind of stuff. And to me, this is kind of a straightforward equation of, X amount of average snowfall plus Y amount of, average temperature equals the outcome in terms of ratios of salt, grit, or other types of resources. And then we look at that from a cost perspective. But I don't think that ratio or that mathematical function is likely that different city to city when you look at the science behind it. So I do think there's a higher order of government support component to this, and I appreciate your time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. Okay, I'm going to move to Councillor King for wrap up.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I'd like to thank the committee for its indulgence of this motion, and also for the good conversations. This motion is actually more of a team effort between the chair, the vice chair, and other councillors who sit around the table. I think I just want to clarify that this motion really represents a balanced approach that acknowledges two essential priorities for our city: maintaining public safety during winter months while protecting our vital waterways and ecosystems. Just for clarity, what we're asking through this motion for is quite straightforward: a focused review of current practices, transparency with the public about our salt management plan, and consideration of how we might improve our approach moving forward. And I really want to thank staff for their cooperation and the provision of information through a rich, insightful presentation, and for some of the work that they are doing to improve salt application, which I know was just outlined by the general manager in terms of work improving our salting equipment for sidewalks, as example, through a pilot, with ultimately moving towards more technological interventions that will ensure that salt is spread more efficiently and effectively. But I think it does behoove us as a city to examine what other municipalities are doing. And I think it's a great thing that staff has also emphasized that they're aware that salt management practices continue to evolve and that they're looking at better and more environmentally conscious ways of undertaking those salt management practices without compromising public safety. So I think with all the work that was done on this motion, I really want to thank many people around this table who contributed to both the inquiry and the process. And also I want to thank staff for their responsiveness to our inquiries. And I also want to thank residents and advocacy organizations that have been really talking about the need for us to be more environmentally conscious about our salt management practices. I think that this motion is a good first step. We haven't visited this subject in a while, and so I think it is important for us to revisit it, ensure that sunlight comes in before any other decisions are advanced. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Okay, is the motion carried? Okay, thank you very much. Any notices of motion members want to bring forward at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any inquiries. We have 2 inquiries that I'm aware of. I'll move to the Vice Chair first for your inquiry.
Thanks very much. It's a little bit long, so just bear with me. In fall 2021, delegations at the then Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management Committee expressed support for the development of an invasive plant program. An inquiry was submitted on the staff costs for a coordinator program, followed by a motion in April 2022 to consider this position for the 2023 budget. Although funding was not secured, some progress has been made within forestry services to support community efforts for invasive plant removal and stewardship of land. These includes development of a process for forestry stewardship agreements with insured community groups, 12 of which are now in place across the city, 2 of which are within the Alta Vista ward. Pilot for allowance of removal of 2 invasive species, dog strangling vine and buckthorn, both common and glossy. Consideration for invasive species removal and other city policy, for example, providing yellow bags to groups with a stewardship agreement who cannot meet the 3-bag limit. As processes to support invasive plant removal in the city have improved, so has the proliferation of invasive plant species and the desire for community participation. Could staff please provide detail on what the resource implications would be of adding the following enhancements to the existing program, as well as commenting on their feasibility? Expanding the invasive plant species that can be collected under stewardship agreements to include species such as garlic mustard, periwinkle, and goutweed. Providing an invasive species reporting form for the public, such as used in the city of Mississauga, or leveraging an existing platform such as iNaturalist. Undertaking a mapping exercise to document invasive plant species and their pervasiveness. Updating website content to include information on the current program elements in place, projects that are underway, and greater educational tools. And developing a stewardship program such as the Toronto Nature Stewards, where the expertise of existing volunteers with demonstrated knowledge can be leveraged.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair, for that inquiry. We'll now move to Councillor Tierney for an inquiry.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's one of those weird ones because I think we actually.
Councillor Tierney, you're muted.
Oh, there, unmuted now. Sorry about that. First of all, thank you. I know there's multiple places, but I continually get questions related to this. We do a great job on our hazardous waste depots. And so basically, in a nutshell, can the City of Ottawa create a single one-stop, easy-to-find web page that consolidates all the information, all waste disposal options, including hazardous waste depots that we successfully run in the city, as well as electronic waste, hazardous waste, disposal services offered by other private companies. And certainly I know that there's other sites that are out there. Unfortunately, they're not bilingual. And I understand there's probably ramifications by us even pointing towards other sites, but I think there's some great companies out there that do great work, and I'm just trying to find one-stop bilingual shopping for people. So hopefully staff can come back with something that can assist us and our residents in finding spots to be able to drop things off. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Tierney. We are moving on to any other business. Not seeing any. And we are adjourned. The next tentative meeting is
Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. We're going to have to see if there's a lot of agenda items or not for that one. So stay tuned on a potential communique about that date. Thanks everyone for your great engagement today. Nice to have this meeting with you. See you soon.